He read her name on the guest list and smiled the way men smile when they believe they have already won. The invitation had been his idea, and he had not tried to disguise it as anything other than what it was. His assistant, a young man named Trevor, who had learned early not to ask questions that made his employer uncomfortable, had hand-delivered the envelope to the lobby of her office building in downtown Toronto. The envelope was cream-colored and heavy. The ink on the front was embossed. It was the kind of envelope that announced itself before it was even opened, and that was the point. Lionel Ashworth had spent a considerable amount of time selecting the stationery. He was 47 years old, recently engaged to a woman named Cassandra, who was 31 and worked in brand consulting, and he was, by every visible measure, doing extremely well. The condo on the 38th floor, the Porsche in the underground garage, the corner office at the private equity firm he had built over 12 years, into something that people in certain circles referred to by first name alone, Ashworth Capital, as though it were a person rather than a company. He had been featured in a business magazine the previous spring. The photograph showed him, standing with his hands in his pockets near a window, looking comfortable in the way that people look when someone has told them to look comfortable and they have believed it. The invitation was for a wedding reception, black tie, Royal Ontario Museum, a Saturday in late April, and the name on the envelope was Kemi Adeyinka-Ross, his ex-wife. The woman who had, in the years before he became the version of himself he currently preferred, worked 2 jobs to pay the rent on the Scarborough apartment where they had lived while he finished his MBA. The woman who had taken calls from his mother when he did not want to, who had proofread every business plan he had ever written, in the beginning, when there were 7 drafts of each one, and none of them were good yet, who had sat across from him at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning with a red pen and said quietly, "This part doesn't hold together, Lionel." And he had been annoyed at the time and grateful later, though he had never said so out loud, and eventually stopped feeling the gratitude at all. They had been divorced for 4 years. He thought she would decline. He had told Cassandra as much. "She'll see it for what it is," he had said, and that was the truth. He wanted her to see it for what it was. He wanted Kemi Adeyinka-Ross to open that envelope in whatever office she now occupied, with whatever assistant she now had, and understand, clearly and without ambiguity, that Lionel Ashworth had arrived somewhere she was not invited to stay. She confirmed attendance the following Tuesday. Trevor brought him the message on a printed sheet because Lionel preferred things on paper, and he read it twice. She had not replied through the formal RSVP channel. She had sent a brief email directly to his assistant. "Please confirm receipt. Ms. Adeyinka-Ross will attend. She will have 2 guests." He had not anticipated that. He set the paper down on his desk and looked at it for a moment longer than he intended to, then picked up his phone and called Cassandra to tell her Kemi was coming, and that this was fine, that it was good, actually, because it meant she understood the message. Cassandra said, "Wonderful," and moved on to a question about the floral arrangements, and Lionel told himself he agreed. What he did not tell Cassandra, what he had not told anyone, was that Kemi Adeyinka-Ross had, in the 4 years since their divorce, become one of the most quietly consequential figures in Canadian technology. Not the kind of consequential that got you on magazine covers or invited to panels at Collision. The kind that happened in board meetings and term sheets, and the particular silence that falls in a room when someone with real leverage has just entered it. She had founded a data infrastructure company called Meridian Analytics in the first year after the divorce. On a seed round she had negotiated herself, with a pitch deck she had built in 6 weeks at a kitchen table that was, by all accounts, not very different from the kitchen table in Scarborough where she had once sat across from him with a red pen. Meridian Analytics had closed a Series C 18 months ago at a valuation that had made the technology press very interested and had made Lionel, privately, feel something he did not have a clean word for. He had not mentioned Kemi's name in any of his interviews. Not once. He had spoken extensively about his own persistence, his instincts, his willingness to make hard calls. He had mentioned a general debt to early mentors and supporters, keeping it vague enough to mean nothing. The omission had not bothered him at the time. By the time the magazine came out with his photograph, he had already stopped thinking of those years in Scarborough as something that had been built together. He thought of them, on the rare occasions he thought of them at all, as a period he had survived. The evening of the reception arrived with the kind of late April weather that Toronto specializes in. Cold underneath and bright on top, the light long and pale, the wind coming off the lake with the particular determination of a season that has not quite decided what it wants to be yet. The museum's main hall had been transformed. White flowers everywhere, the kind of arrangement that requires a coordinator and a budget and a florist with a hyphenated surname. Cassandra looked beautiful. Lionel stood near the entrance and shook hands and accepted congratulations and felt, for the first 20 minutes, exactly as he had expected to feel. Then the doors opened again, and the room did something rooms sometimes do, which is that it shifted its attention without appearing to move at all. Kemi Adeyinka-Ross walked in. She was wearing a deep green dress, the kind of color that takes confidence to choose and more confidence to wear in a room full of people who are already looking at you. Her hair was natural and pulled up. She wore one piece of jewelry, a wide gold cuff on her left wrist that caught the light from the chandelier overhead. She was not smiling in the way guests smile when they arrive at parties, a little hopeful, a little uncertain. She was not smiling at all. She was simply moving through the space, the way people move when they have somewhere to be, and they are not concerned about whether anyone notices them getting there. The two guests she had brought were women. One was tall and wore a charcoal blazer and had the posture of someone who has spent considerable time making herself useful in complicated situations. The other was shorter and carried a leather portfolio and moved with the quiet efficiency of a person whose job it is to know everything that is happening in any given room. They were not bodyguards in the theatrical sense of the word. They were something more specific than that, and more deliberate. They were the kind of people who made other people in the room recalculate without being able to say exactly why. A man standing near Lionel, Jeffrey Crane, a partner at a Bay Street firm who had known Lionel for 9 years, leaned over and said quietly, "Is that Kemi Adeyinka-Ross?" Lionel said yes. Jeffrey Crane said, "From Meridian Analytics?" Lionel said yes again. Jeffrey Crane looked at him for a moment with an expression that Lionel found difficult to categorize, and then excused himself and walked toward the entrance of the room. He was not the only one. There was a ripple, not dramatic, not obvious, but present, as people who recognized her name or her face or simply the particular quality of her entrance began to recalibrate the evening's social geometry. A woman in a silver dress who worked in venture capital left her conversation mid-sentence to intercept Kemi near the first table. A man who had been speaking to Cassandra turned to follow the movement with his eyes. Cassandra noticed. She was good at noticing things, which was part of what Lionel had always appreciated about her, and which was now, for the first time, something he found complicated. She came to stand beside him and said, in the particular tone she used when she wanted to sound neutral and wasn't quite managing it, "She's very striking." Lionel said, "She always was." He hadn't meant to say it that way. He moved toward the bar. Kemi did not approach him. She moved through the room with the calm deliberateness of someone who had decided, before she arrived, exactly how she intended to conduct herself. She accepted a glass of sparkling water. She spoke to people who approached her, and they approached her frequently. She laughed once, at something the woman in the charcoal blazer said, a real laugh, not a reception laugh. She did not look in Lionel's direction, or if she did, he could not catch it. This was not what he had imagined. He had imagined something simpler, something more legible. He had imagined her moving through the periphery of the evening, aware of what it meant to be here, aware of what it meant that he had built all of this without her. He had imagined a kind of quiet devastation, not theatrical, just present, the way a person carries a loss in a room full of people who don't know about it. What he saw instead was a woman who appeared to have no losses to carry. or to have set them down somewhere a long time ago and not looked back. He found her near the windows at 8:45. He had told himself he wasn't looking for her, and then he had spent 45 minutes looking for her. She turned when he approached. She did not seem surprised to see him. She did not seem to be anything in particular, which was its own kind of unsettling. He said her name. She said, Lionel. He said she looked well. He said he was glad she had come. He said he hoped she was enjoying the evening, and he was aware, even as he said it, that the words had the hollow sound of a conversation he had rehearsed, and was now discovering did not fit the actual situation. She looked at him with an expression that was not hostile and was not warm. It was the expression of a person who has had a long time to understand a situation and has understood it. She said, I heard congratulations are in order. He said, Yes, thank you. We're very happy. She said, Good. There was a pause. He said, I'm glad things are going well for you too. I've seen the press on Meridian. She nodded slightly, as though he had said something obvious. He said, You've done something real there. She said, I have. He said, I always knew you were capable of it. And that was where something shifted in the room between them. It was small. It was not visible to anyone passing by, but he felt it, and she did not look away from him when it happened. She said, That's interesting. He said, What is? She said, You always knew I was capable of it. You never said so at the time. He said, I showed it in other ways. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked away, toward the windows, at the city below, at the lights along the waterfront and the dark line of the lake beyond them. She said, You invited me here tonight because you wanted me to see what you'd built. He didn't answer. She said, I understand that. I did come to see it, he said. And? She turned back to him. She said, And it's very nice, Lionel. The flowers are beautiful. Cassandra seems lovely. You've done well for yourself. He waited. There was something in her voice that told him she was not finished. She said, But I want you to think about something. And I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because I think, somewhere you already know it. She said, The first business plan you ever wrote that was actually worth anything. The one you took to your first investor meeting. The one that eventually became the seed of Ashworth Capital. I rewrote the financial projections on that plan 3 times. You know that. I was working a double shift at the hospital on a Friday night, and I came home at 6 in the morning, and I rewrote them, because the numbers in your version didn't reflect your actual cost structure. You had a meeting on Monday. Lionel said nothing. She said, I'm not asking you to put my name on something. That's not what this is. But I think you invited me here tonight, because on some level you needed me to witness what you've become. And I'm here, Lionel. I'm witnessing it. I just want you to also witness what I'm going to say, which is this. She said, You didn't build this alone. She said it the same way she had said everything else, without raising her voice, without performing the words, without needing him to collapse in order for her to feel that they had landed. She picked up her glass of water from the windowsill. She said, I hope your marriage is a good one. I mean that. And then she walked back into the room. He stood at the windows for a while. Below, along the waterfront, a streetcar moved through the amber light and disappeared around a curve. He watched it go. The woman in the charcoal blazer materialized at Kemi's side as she rejoined the gathering, and said something that made Kemi tilt her head, and then nod once. The woman with the leather portfolio was already on her phone. Not urgently, but purposefully. The way someone moves through a task they have done many times before. Across the room, Jeffrey Crane was standing very close to Kemi and speaking with the particular posture of a person who has recently realized he should have introduced himself sooner. Cassandra found Lionel at the windows a few minutes later. She said, Are you all right? He said. Yes, of course. She looked at him the way she sometimes did, with the clear-eyed patience of someone who has noticed more than she has said, and then she took his arm and turned him gently back toward the room. The evening continued. Speeches were made. There was a first dance, and then the floor opened, and the light changed from cool to warm. Kemi left at 9:30. Lionel saw her go. She paused near the entrance for a moment, not looking back, just pausing, the way a person pauses before stepping back into the ordinary world from a place they did not especially need to be. And then the door closed behind her. He did not sleep well that night. He lay in the dark for a long time, and at some point before morning, he got up and went to the kitchen and stood in the light of the open refrigerator without taking anything out. He was thinking about a Friday night, a kitchen table. Numbers that didn't add up. The particular sound of her pen moving across paper at 6 in the morning when she had been awake for 24 hours and was fixing, quietly, the thing he had gotten wrong. He had known she was there. He just hadn't thought about what it meant. By the time the city outside had begun to shift from dark to gray, he had arrived at something that he could not quite name yet, but that felt uncomfortably like the early stage of understanding. Not redemption, not resolution. Something smaller and more honest than either of those. The beginning of an accounting he had been postponing for a very long time. He went back to bed. Cassandra was asleep. He lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about the cost of certain kinds of forgetting, and how long it sometimes takes for that cost to arrive. Meridian Analytics announced a strategic partnership with a major federal procurement initiative the following Thursday. The news ran in the Globe and the Star, and in several technology publications. A photograph accompanied most of the coverage. Kemi Adeyinka-Ross at a podium, the woman in the charcoal blazer visible just at the edge of the frame, her expression composed, her posture exact. Lionel read the article at his desk on a Friday morning. He read it once, and then he closed the browser, and then he opened it again and read it a second time. His assistant knocked and then entered with a stack of documents. Trevor, 26 years old, careful and efficient, and not yet old enough to have learned all the things that make men careful in the wrong directions. He set the documents on the desk and asked if there was anything else. Lionel said, "Actually, yes, there's something I need to do." Trevor waited. Lionel said, "I need to write a letter. A real one, not an email. Do we still have the good stationery?" Trevor said they did. Lionel said, "I'll write it myself. Just bring me the paper." He sat for a while after Trevor left, looking at the blank sheet of cream-colored paper on his desk. The same weight he had chosen for the invitations. He noticed that now. He wondered if he had noticed it then, and decided, honestly, that he had not. He picked up his pen. He did not know yet if the letter would be enough. He did not know if she would read it, or what she would think if she did. He was not writing it because he expected something in return. He was writing it because she had stood at a window in a room full of his flowers and his music and his carefully constructed idea of himself. And she had said the true thing, clearly, without needing anything from him in order to say it. And she had been right. Outside, the city moved. The lake was visible from where he sat, pale and enormous, and not particularly concerned with any of this. He wrote the first line, then the second. He did not cross anything out. He had spent enough time in his life revising things in the wrong direction. This time he let the words be what they were, and he kept going.